Randy Bachman was a founding member of the bands The Guess Who and Bachman Turner Overdrive. His talents as a guitarist, songwriter, and producer has earned him over 120 silver, gold, and platinum albums and singles awards from around the world for his recordings. His songwriting has put him in the #1 spot on radio playlists in over 20 countries, and his total record sales exceed 40 million albums and singles. His songs have been recorded by numerous artists and placed in dozens of television, movie, and commercial soundtracks. Here's a little about him and a few stories you might enjoy hearing. If you like the video, I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel. Now on to Randy Bachman. Born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, September 27, 1943. At age 5, he had started studying the violin in the Royal Toronto Conservatory system. He studied violin until he was into his teens when he grew dissatisfied with the structured lessons. But he says that it taught him how important practice was, and even today, at age 79, Randy says he still practices his instrument daily. What really brought on a change in Randy's music was Elvis Presley. One of his stories goes something like this. I never got to meet him, but that's a story in itself. It was thanks to seeing Elvis doing Tutti Frutti on TV that I gave up the classical violin and took up rock and roll. Years later, I wrote the song Taking Care of Business for Bachman Turner Overdrive. Elvis heard it on the radio and liked it so much that he adopted it for his anthem. The story of not getting to meet Elvis, Randy goes on to say, back when BTO was falling apart, we were offered the chance to meet Elvis. Well, the rest of the band were told about the meeting, but things were so bad between us that they never told me. So they went to meet him without me. The very first thing Elvis said was, "Where's Randy Bachman, the guy who wrote that song?" They stuttered, well, he didn't want to come along. I was devastated when I found out what had happened. This was the man who changed my life. But on a brighter note, when Elvis died, one of his entourage gave Randy a solid gold pendant that he always wore. It had the letters TCB with a lightning flash through it. But man, that had to be bad. Your bandmates do that to you? That had to hurt. As a teen, Randy met guitarist Lenny Breau, with whom he developed a friendship and learned some of his technique and playing styles. Randy was a guitarist with Chad Allen and the Silvertones, later the Reflections, in the early 1960s. They made some noise around town and recorded some songs that did okay locally. It was in 1965 they started calling the band The Guess Who, and after that, their keyboard player Bob Ashley left the group, and a young kid named Burton Cummings was hired. And that's when things started to move forward quick. Chad Allen was to leave the group, and Burton Cummings was to take over the lead vocals. Burton and Randy both being trained musicians, Randy on violin and Burton on the piano, started writing songs. They were to write songs together and individually that still stand up strong even today after almost 60 years. Songs like These Eyes, Laughing, Undone, No Time, American Woman, No Sugar Tonight. But out of all these songs, the one that has a unique but tragic story behind the writing is Undone. This was a song Randy wrote on his own, and it was influenced by a real-life incident. Here's the story. Randy says he had met a girl in Vancouver when they were out touring, being the opening act for Alice Cooper and Frank Zappa, who was the headliner at the time. After the tour, they had a big party to celebrate the end of the tour at a friend's house on the campus of the University of Manitoba. Randy had brought this girl back to the party with him. They were there hanging out and listening to music, and Randy says somebody put something in her drink. She had a fit on the floor and went into a coma. The ambulance and the Mounties were called, but the girl never woke up. She was taken to the hospital where she passed away a week later. Well, after that experience, Randy heard the Bob Dylan song Ballad in Plain D, and he heard the line, "She Came Undone." And he had these jazz chords already in place and came up with the hook, She's Come Undone. Like the Dylan song, Randy had wrote about 10 verses to it. So then he took it over to Burton Cummings' hotel room and played it for him. Burton congratulated him on writing his first song alone and told him that this was a hit if he were to drop about 7 verses of it. Randy did just that, and the song became a hit. She's Come Undone was released as the B-side of Laughing. It got radio play when some disc jockeys flipped the single and played it instead, which prompted the record company to release it as an A-side 4 months later. And the flute solo you hear on the recording is Burton Cummings. At Randy's urging, Burton, who had played saxophone, saw a flute in a store one day, and when the salesman told him the fingering was the same as the sax, Burton paid $20 for the flute and was playing it on stage that same night. There's no doubt that Randy and Burton was a great songwriting team. Randy said there was and still is something special between them today. So why did Randy quit the Guess Who? One reason was because of the gallbladder problems he was having. Randy was ordered by his doctor to take a break. But Randy's own words was, the band was into the drug culture and I wasn't. And our taste in music had changed. So I stayed home for a couple of years before forming the band Brave Belt, which evolved into Bachman Turner Overdrive. I don't know how many people know this, but Randy Bachman has never taken drugs, which was a rarity back in those days in the music world. And still to this day, he stays away from it. Randy's focus his whole life has been music. After leaving the Guess Who and taking a break, he started working with Chad Allen again in a country rock group called Brave Belt. They put out a couple of albums which didn't do that well. Many felt Brave Belt was just ahead of their time, given the Eagles' later success. But after their 2 albums failed to sell, Randy found himself back at the starting line once more. Now Randy was thinking his decision to walk away from the Guess Who had branded him both a lunatic and a loser. It seemed nobody wanted to work with me, he said. So I looked to my family. He already had a younger sibling, Robbie, on drums, while other brothers, Tim, came in on guitar, and Gary managed the band. Lead singer Chad Allen left, and at Neil Young's suggestion, Randy turned to Fred Turner, a musician from the same Winnipeg background as both Young and the Guess Who. Neil and my brother Gary said we really needed a strong lead singer. Why not look at Fred Turner? He had this huge, what we call Harley-Davidson voice, a John Fogerty kind of thing. Equally important, Turner was married, didn't do drugs, and was a settled working musician. Bachman Turner Overdrive was formed, and if Randy had thoughts of showing his former band, the Guess Who, that he could do better, well, it didn't take him long to prove he could. The Guess Who brought Randy's music to North America, but Bachman Turner Overdrive was to take it worldwide, with hits like Let It Ride, Roll On Down the Highway, Taking Care of Business, Looking Out for Number One, Hey You, and You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet. In 1974, Bachman Turner Overdrive was the biggest selling recording act in popular music. The song Taking Care of Business was one that Randy wrote and sang lead vocals on. It also features some piano work from the band that was a 2-guitar band. How did the piano end up on the track? The story Randy tells is pretty strange. After I wrote the song and we started doing it live, Fred Turner said, "I don't want to sing the song, you sing it. This gives me a break and you a chance to sing one of our songs." So a few weeks later, we go into the recording studio and there's a knock at the studio door. And a guy standing there, about 6'4", wearing a Fidel Castro hat and army fatigues, big black beard and frizzy hair, and he's holding some pizza. And he says, "You guys order pizza?" And I say, "No, go down the hall. Steve Miller's in B. Maybe they probably ordered it." So now we're getting ready to go home as we've been there since noon, and it was now like 1 o'clock in the morning. But then again we hear a knock on the door, and as we're putting on our jackets, ready to go back to the hotel, there's the pizza guy standing there. And he says, "I've been listening to the song outside the studio. It sounds like you could really use a piano." And I said, "Yeah, I agree." It does have that feel, you know, like Little Richard, Elton John, but they're like in LA going crazy right now, so I might get them to play on it later. He says, I'm a piano player. Can you give me a break? I said, what do you mean? He says, I can play to the song. So I said, okay, who am I not to give a guy a break? You got one take. We just threw a mic on the piano, covered it with a blanket, and said, okay, you got one take. I said to him, play a little bit of Little Richard, Elton John, and Dr. John. So he's going to give me a sample. So every verse is different. You hear the first verse is like a honky cat, the second one is like Dr. John, and the third one is like Little Richard when he played. I said, thank you very much. And he went home, and we went home. We came back the next morning, and Charlie Flash flew in to hear the album one day early. I said to the engineer, we haven't heard the piano back, so when you play Taking Care of Business, don't play the piano track. But halfway through, the engineer pushed up the volume control, and then it came to the piano, and Charlie said, what is that, BTO with a piano? You're going to get real estate on Top 40 radio. Play it again. We backed it up and played, and he said, that's incredible. He said, who is it? I said, the guy delivered pizza here, and he asked to play the piano, and I gave him a shot. Well, you got to find out who he is, and if he's in the union, we're in trouble. If he's not in the union, we need his permission. This song, you're going to be playing it every day for the rest of your life. It's a feel-good song, and everybody likes to dance. It's like, let's rock and roll. So they ended up calling around the pizza places and finding the guy whose name is Norman Durkee. Now, your guesses are as good as mine if this story is true or not. Norman Durkee said in an interview that he was not a pizza delivery guy, but a session musician there to cut some commercials. The story I told you came from Randy Bachman's mouth. So you be the judge of how the piano actually got on Taking Care of Business. And if you know anything or you want to add to it, feel free to in the comments section. Randy Bachman left Bachman Turner Overdrive early in 1977. The last TV show he did with the band being the New Year's Eve '76. Randy went on to have a good solo career, reunions with old bandmates, and even today at 79 he still enjoys the music. Randy has some tour dates set up later on in the summer and fall. You can find up-to-date information on him at his website, which is randybachman.com. His friend Neil Young had this to say about him. Randy has a way of playing and delivering solos that have emotion in them. He plays with feeling. It's more than just guitar chops with Randy. I feel Randy when I hear him play. He was my biggest influence when I was starting out watching him play guitar. He was the founding members of not one but two iconic bands of the 60s and 70s. Wrote and performed some timeless hit songs and is a member of the Musicians Hall of Fame. But so far, up in Cleveland, all we hear is crickets. Same with both of the bands he formed too. Hope you enjoyed the video and the few short stories on Randy. If you have anything you'd like to add, please feel free to do so in the comments sections. And hit the like button and subscribe on your way out. Thanks for watching.